All right, welcome into the half, everybody. My name is Aaron Montgomery. I'm with our success group, and we inspire people to build a business that they love. Excited to be here on the half, sir.
Yes, and happy to be here too. I'm Eric Campbell and over at erichcampbell.com, among other places. And here to maybe not inspire you to build business, probably to inspire you to build some stitches because I'm usually talking about embroidery, among other things, and maybe a little e commerce along the way when I get a chance to. But yeah, folks, glad to be here today. We had a pretty great episode of Two Regular Guys we're coming off of. So a little bit coming in hot. We ran a little bit late because we had issues, as we often do in the live broadcasting business. But it was a great show with Charlie Taubley where we got to hear lots of awesome stories about his history in the industry, as well as just what he thinks about things going on in the industry. So great Two Regular Guys this morning, and really kind of a fantastic merging, what I would say, funny enough, of historical kind of precedent for where things have come from, and honestly, a comment on how we kind of don't move into the future well enough, which from a guy who is definitely pushing some of the most industry experience ever. So from a guy with 47 years plus of industry experience, having him say, man, people rely on old technology too much, it certainly made me prick up my ears and listen a little harder today. So it was kind of interesting that where we went from that. I mean, didn't you feel the same way when he said that? I was like, wow, you hear a lot of us going, people have forgotten how we used to handle things. I mean, there was a little bit of that going on, but there was also like, hey, you guys are just not trying, not changing, not doing new stuff. And that was kind of good to hear from somebody who's been in the business so long.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of times you get the the old well, back in my day it was way better kind of thing, right? And he the reason that he's been around, like he said, the reason he's been around this for as long as he has is the fact that he loves it, and he is always looking to move forward and look for new ways, and saying that the biggest challenge that people are faced with is that they rely on old technology, old thoughts too much, I think might be another way to put that. So
I'd say for sure. And that's the thing. A lot of us do these processes. In fact, if you want to take it on kind of a less, historical look and just in general, I feel like rather than just saying historically in the industry, we have these old processes that hang around. I think any of us in any part of this business, we have a tendency to do something and have it work. It works out. It functions. It provides enough utility for us. And then we just don't question it. Like we don't question that again. Once it's in process and it works, we don't question it. I'm not saying you spend all day questioning everything. If you do that, you're in that kind of analysis by paralysis by analysis stage where all you do is research everything and you never do anything. At the same time, we should review things often enough to say, hey, been doing this for a minute. Yes, maybe it's working. Could I do better? And then also release that feeling of like, somebody has a different way from us, that's somehow a send up of what we're doing. It's not, a necessarily a contradiction to what we're doing. It's just like, hey, here's another way. Why not consider it? Why not consider it? And I think funny enough for me, where I think I get some of that is dealing with folks who are both just coming in and people who are from other sides of the industry from me. And I'll say what's always funny. In fact, I've got a show coming on later on Sega today where I essentially call it Digitizing Debate, where I'm going to talk about the different tools and things that we use and the processes we do. But what I've told people before, and it's not like a big spoiler alert. In fact, sometimes I will write it in the comments. Oh, spoiler alert! There's no debate. All of these things are viable for one version or another. What I find is every time somebody gives you a hard and fast rule, they're like, "This is the density you should have for satin stitches." I'm like, unless you're doing this kind of work, unless you're doing this kind of material, unless you want it to look like this. Like, absolutely, there's always a use case for a large part of the things. I mean, there are certain things I think are absolutely no and absolutely not to be done. But most of the time, there's different processes for different applications. And you may not think of the various and sundry applications we have for our work that aren't what you usually do, aren't the kind of standard. And also people's standards are different. My standard work is business to business logo work. That's what I did the most of. Certainly it's also team sports and other stuff and resort wear, all that stuff goes in there. But if you think about what I did most of my career, it's like left chest, corporate logos, pretty full coverage, lots of spot block color. That is the top end of what I did all the time. If I was to say the one thing I did the most, it's definitely logo work. I'm going to have a very different way of handling things than someone who always does fashion. But it's still machine embroidery. It's still the same set of tools. It's still the same work. For real. Yeah. There's practical stuff you have to know. There's technical rules that make sense that have to be worked on. But there's also a lot of stuff where the debate isn't, is it right or wrong? It's what works best for what situation. It's like fitness for a situation. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, so let's see here. Let's keep talking about this a little bit, Eric, but I want to say hi to everybody that's checking in too. Jesse, hello.
Hey, Jesse.
Kingsbury Craft in. We've got Ramona checking in from Quick to Stitch. Yep. And Jesse had to run. So sorry, we missed you, Jesse.
Hey, that's cool, man. Catch the replay if you can.
And I think you already kind of covered this a little bit, but yeah. Definitely.
Ron says there are practical rules that need to be followed still. Yeah, I mean, there's also just things that are physical, especially in embroidery. And I know that, yes, print is also this way, but let's just put it this way. When you're stabbing a needle through something thousands of times and leaving behind thread, these practical rules you run up against in a real way, real quick. There is a top end of density before there are problems. There is a smallest stitch before it knots up and does not work anymore. There's a longest stitch before it slows down. Software converts it to a trim, or we find out that it's loopy and hangs off the material. Those are all possible things. The thing is, even some of those rules aren't as solid as you think. The longest stitch one, I've seen people make crazy long stitches and couch them down, and couching being that you would sew them down with another stitch over the top to make different textural effects on material. It's just something you wouldn't usually do, and it does slow your machine down. It's not something you do for standard logo work, but I've seen people do it when desired and make it work. So it's like, I think the thing is, we often say this is impossible. This is not a thing you could ever do. And I think never is a really strong word to throw around for a lot of the things that we call rules,
For sure.
Though I'm sure as the sublimation guy you're going to fight about this one. We could start a fight over dipping mugs right now if we wanted to. That's the one I get you on.
But you know what? Here's go ahead and dip your mugs all you want, and then I'll get your customers when you're done because they're tired of their handles falling off. But all right.
Those are technical things. Like I said, that's like densities where I'm like, no, there is a density at which a garment is not comfortable to wear. Is it a number? Not all the time. Is it one number that goes for everything? Not all the time.
All right. Well, Eric, anything else from the show today? I think that's actually a really good recap that you gave us, kind of a big golden nugget to pull out of that. But anything else, or should we get into weekly wins?
Yeah, it's hard to do too much for recapping with Mr. Charlie Tell, because he does a lot of personal stories. I'm like, I can't retell you all of Charlie's stories. That's the hard part. But yeah, it's like that. That's the thing. But and here, I'll go ahead and we got Ron has another comment. I'll give him that. He says, practical in the sense of push and pull of stitches. No, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Here's the thing I'm going to tell you that's kind of crazy. Yes, we have to have those rules for push and pull and understand them. But even within the stuff we do regularly, that's the thing. Yeah. There are different rules depending on what you're doing. And yes, they are based on technique. But here's the one that I always point to. People will tell you, absolutely, I'm never going to run a density over 0.3 millimeters, 3 embroidery points, and then they do foam at 2, which is higher, or 0.18. They do incredibly high densities for foam. I'm just saying that there are exceptions to every rule, and so sometimes it's like people will throw out a rule and just say you'd never do this, you never do that, and I say never is always a strong word. It's always just depending on what you're doing. But you're totally right. Yeah. Pull and push absolutely are always in effect. The thickness of thread doesn't change. The size of the needle doesn't change. So certain short stitches are always going to cause problems. For embroidery especially, absolutely. And Ramona's down to 0.16. So 1.6 embroidery points, incredibly tight. I don't even really go that tight mostly. 0.18 is where I drop out most of the time. But yeah, that's the thing. It's more that a lot of people will throw out blanket statements about what we can and can't do and what you will and won't do. And they don't always make sense. Now, the stuff that we're talking about from Charlie, he's talking about screen meshes. And that's one of those things. And even to the degree, embroidery is a little bit less like this. It's about balancing everything else down the chain. You can use different meshes. You just have to do all of the other things it requires to work well. So yeah, like I said, it really depends on what you're doing. And some of these rules change depending on what we're working on. Now, trust me, I would never do this. I would never do a flat stitched piece with that kind of density. That's never going to happen. Yeah. 3D foam, we use it for cutting. And like I said, but even then, everybody tells you to use these for 3D foam. There are ways to use 3D foam that also are less stitching than this and cut okay. It just depends on what you do. The thing is, knowing in fact, this is where Ron's right and Ramona's right. Understanding your medium And knowing how it works means that you adjust these things with knowledge instead of just throwing the numbers that someone tells you.
Yeah.
I think that's the important thing. And in fact, what Charlie said that we can take out of that, he said, people stop experimenting. People stop trying things. People think they don't have to do any testing themselves. And when we understand the nature of the medium we're working with, we can do that testing and know what happens or predict what happens when we change those numbers. I think that's what's interesting to talk about for sure. Yeah. And Ramona says, I try not to use the word never, but if I do, I qualify it with a statement regarding the situation. Yeah. Like I said, there are certainly things I will still say are not great ideas. That's what I like to tell people. It's like, can we do it? Yeah. Is it a great idea? Maybe not. Are there things that we probably can't do and also reliably in production? Because even some of the stuff Charlie talked about, he's like, yeah, we do that, but maybe in production, that's going to take longer, going to take less time. Depends on how you're getting paid and how that works for you. There's some stuff that in production you wouldn't catch me doing that is possible. Yeah. Put it that way too. That's one of those things. It depends on your goal. Production, repeatable production for a shop is very different than single boutique pieces, is very different than fashion, is different than upholstery, is different than whatever else you're doing. It's like, it depends on your market, depends on the material you're working on. And knowing that is about knowing the medium in any case. Though I will have one more funny thing for the recap before we roll on to weekly wins. And that is, I'm going to share something I shared in our back channel because it's fun and we're on the half. Terry said, "Oh, Eric, you got to work this in for your next show. Like, do something. Sauce. Yeah. Do secret sauce. Do something with stitches get stitches." We're like kind of uncomfortably laughing.
Snitches
so like, that's
get
a weird
stitches. Yeah.
Aaron's like, I don't know about that, Terry. And I was like, well, sadly, I beat you to it. So this is a hat that I made back in the dad hat era over at Black Duck. Black Duck is the place, the biggest shop that I kind of worked at. And what I want to show you guys is that not only did I modify snitches get stitches, I used to wear this around that says everyone gets stitches. And this is the classic origami duck logo that everybody in Albuquerque knows is from Black Duck. So the joke being, of course, as an embroiderer, I was like, hey, yeah, not just stitches get stitches. Everybody gets stitches when you come around my shop. At the same time, as you guys know, I'm a fairly affable human. I'm the least likely to punch somebody in the head. But suffice it to say, it was a funny thing because I wore this sucker, and there are pictures of me, like I believe in Impressions magazine somewhere, it might have been Stitches magazine back in the day, looking mean with this thing on my head, which is hilarious if you know me. But yeah. Yes, I have made some probably slightly inappropriate Stitch jokes over my time, but that one I still like. I might have to resurrect that hat with my own logo at some point soon. I think maybe Brian would have a problem if I did that with the Brilliance logo. I'll have to check with corporate on that one. But certainly my logo might be getting a resurrection of the old everyone gets Stitches hat. Not that I want to pick fights at shows, so I've got to be careful. Got to be careful what after show bar I go to with that one on.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. All right. Well, we ready?
Yes.
Back to something slide into weekly wins here.
Yeah, folks. So what are your weekly wins? No win is too small. If you're here listening live, we would love to hear from you guys. Tell everybody who you want to come share their wins. Come share your wins. Talk about what's going on, whether or not it's industry related. Everybody should be celebrating. We'd like to celebrate you guys today.
Yep. I'm ready. I'm ready to give people rounds of applause. Right? Yeah.
Yes.
So, Eric, I think it's your turn to go first.
All right. Here's one, and this is funny because this is like you guys have been hearing me talk about working on prioritizing stuff in my challenges, right?
Yeah.
And the things that I had to work with, also just dealing with the reality of spreading yourself a little too thin. Well, this last week, despite it being very difficult, I had a difficult discussion with somebody where I had to postpone something that I didn't want to postpone. But I was very honest about the process that went on and what was going on. But at the same time, I also delivered to them some of the stuff that I had been dragging my feet on and got things settled and in motion. So the weekly win was, despite the fact that perfectionist me was like, this can never be right now that I've done something wrong and have to change plans. I still went through the process of working through everything with them, making sure it was all right, and then said everything that I meant about what the scheduling was going to be like, came clean with everything that was going on, and explained everything and arranged it, despite the fact that I was super worried about them just throwing it in my face. You know what I mean? There are times where your internal voice is so unreasonable that you imagine other people outside of you also being unreasonable, and it's not always the case. So for me, I went out and provided some information that you guys are going to love later. I will tell you when it comes out. There's some cool education on the horizon. And some of it was stuff that ended up, it was with some foot dragging on my part. And I got past all the foot dragging, rearranged everything, got some new tools involved, got things dealt with, sent off my materials, and had a great conversation and a real clear setting of goals with someone. So that was like, that's a hard thing sometimes where you have to admit, hey, overbooked, things aren't working, have to fix things up. And I'll say that my win was doing that anyway. Nice. Doing it despite the fact that I felt bad about it.
There you go.
Little win and a big win at the same time, because it came with some materials that took a lot of work.
Yeah. Love it. All right,
folks.
Ron, we'll give you a round of applause here. He says, finished a Nightmare Before Christmas package for a friend to do quilt for herself.
Nice.
Awesome.
All right.
Good job, Ron.
Hey, fiber arts of all kinds are welcome here.
Yeah.
Nicely.
Indeed.
Good deal. So how about you, sir? What's your big weekly win?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go. I had a good week physically and mentally, as far as just kind of getting more clarity on things. Also getting moving. I actually had 15,000 steps yesterday, which is a big one for me. And I went out, got up early, got a walk in, enjoyed some nature. And then I played volleyball last night, and I was like, wow, that was a good day. So, but I'm feeling it today. That's okay. That's right. That's a reminder that I got to do it more often. And then closing out the week by running a 7K. So I think this is health and fitness week for me. I made a commitment to my mastermind group that I was going to drop 5 pounds. So I gotta get on it.
Nice, dude. Nice. Very
nice. So there we go.
Well done. Hey, I joined you yesterday. Little did you know, I was out in the mountains yesterday. So doing the same thing this week twice.
Nice.
Twice out in the mountains. That's what I always tell people. Like, if a New Mexican tells you they're going for a walk in nature, just assume hike. Because it's all mountains where I'm at. Like it's actually a walk here includes elevation.
Yeah, it's a hike there. Awesome. All right, Kingsbury Craft down 7 pounds challenge. Look at you go.
Do it.
Great job.
Do it. It's always hard.
Good job.
I'm with you.
That's super inspiring too. Thank you. Okay, Ramona says, win this week. I help a Facebook group member fix some wonky text in her file. It's what I do. Good job. Nice
job. Is that a lot of what we do as digitizers is fix some walking text? I really, if at the end of our lives we have like a panel come up, as we are finishing out, that gives us our stats, I don't really want to know how many days I spent fixing wonky text. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to be a lot.
Nice. All right. Well, keep those weekly wins coming, you guys. If you got anybody else has them out there. In fact, there's a new comment, but sorry.
No, it's all good. I just love everybody's like clapping for each other. Also,
round of applause. Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you.
Round of applause for everybody. Love it. Screen, but so this is the moment where we get to talk about any challenges that we're facing, any questions. This is a great time to ask. Obviously, you've got an embroidery digitizing expert here in front of you, and so any questions you have for Eric, and any questions you might have for me, or just in general, the challenges that you're working on for yourself that maybe you could use a little feedback on what your solution is, because that's a big thing for me, Eric. Is I want to help people understand. Okay, yes, we need to look at the challenges, but it's what we do after we've identified it that is really the key. Most people just stop at, my life is this, or this thing's happening to me, period.
Yeah.
But it really needs to become, this thing is happening, and here's my potential solution. What do you think? Right? It's what we do after that initial reaction. So we got another win here though. So let's
do that first. Yeah. Grab another win.
Collegiate Press says win, cut and scored 3 custom boxes for 3 lots of 500 labels. So that's awesome.
Nice.
Yes. Yeah.
Good to hear.
Lisa says, good morning. Looking forward to the take up today. Need my normal routine to get back on track. So
it's
been
a hard time. Yep. So I'm glad to have you here, and certainly take up. I'll have to see what you say. We'll have to see how people feel about it, because this is one where I was going to let a lot of comments happen. So if you guys have debates about the tools we use for digitizing, show up to the take up. It should be kind of fun. So, we'll see what happens when everybody gets in the comments. I think this one will cause some people to want to chat. Nice.
And Mashid, thank you for tuning in. And she says, I finished planning for the last 4 months of the year to execute. That's awesome.
Nice.
Great job. Mashid, there's a you should have a package sometime next week. So just a little pre. She took advantage of the opportunity to get a book, and some of the early people, I have a kind of a working copy before it gets done at the publisher. So
nice.
Yeah, so that's heading your way. All right, Ramona's challenge: working on next year's calendar, trying to find a reason to justify impressions at Long Beach.
Well, if you do, you'll certainly see me there. That one's pretty much already set in stone for me. Like I said, we will come up with and tell you more as we know more. But yeah, well, if anybody's going to be out in Long Beach next year, you'll very, very likely see me there.
Yep. Yeah, I at this point, I'm not scheduled to be at Long Beach, and so we'll see. But yeah, I know there's some cool stuff going on out there. They just haven't figured out how to make the make it work for people yet. So.
Oh no, for real. I think that's always hard. That's one of those ones where it's like, if you're gonna choose one, you don't have any other one to go to, and you're just trying to make it work. It's a good one to go to. I'm not gonna say it's not. I mean, I love all the shows because they all have their place, honestly. Yeah. And that's kind of the funny thing. Everybody's like, oh well, what's the best show? And I'm like, well, like a lot of things, I start to talk too much about it. I mean, Long Beach is great to walk the floor and do all that stuff, but you may get less time with individual people necessarily, especially on the busy days and busy times. Dax is great because you'll get a lot of hands-on time. Funny enough, Charlie Talbot talked about that today on the show.
Yeah.
You'll get a lot of hands-on time. People spend more time with you in the education and at the booths. All these shows are great in their own way. That, and also when the show is local to you, that's always great. I mean, that's being in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Yeah, we don't get that, but that's fine.
Nice.
We know about traveling.
Yost has got a win here. My win last week, top 4 in a club of 589 members. And
nice.
Good job.
Yeah, good job. Do it, man. Hit that top 4. That's nice. Cool.
Yeah. So any other challenges that you guys got out there, Eric? Anything that you're working on?
I think mine right now, I'll say some of the challenges are staying motivated in the face of like a bureaucracy is always fun. I'm just going to say that. Some of the platforms we work on are tough, and even though we make our wins, it's a lot of just staying the course. Let's put it this way. That's actually a good one. Let's put it this way. My challenge right now is staying the course. When there are reversions of fortune, when you have things that are hard to deal with, or when you are kind of continuously having to apply a little pressure over and over again, that can be difficult. But reminding yourself that it's a part of the process and you are making incremental progress is something you need to do. So some of these times we celebrate these little weekly wins. You'll notice if you go back over the course of these, I know a lot of mine I've gotten through step 3 of the 12-step process that is still taking me a month. That's just sometimes what it's like. And remembering that and staying the course is a challenge.
If you go back far enough, there was step 1. Oh, look, I'm at step 12 and I never thought I'd get there. Right. So
absolutely. Yeah. It looks a lot different from the top of that hill than it looks like from the bottom. Yeah. And there's a little pain and suffering along the way, no doubt, but you have to remember that is to be expected. I think that's the hard part too. Understanding that that's to be expected and a part of the process, and then continuing to apply pressure when it doesn't feel like the results are as forthcoming as you'd like.
Yeah. Well, if I can talk to that for 1 second, because I'm actually in the middle of listening to this podcast. It's really interesting. It's a guy that he's not a brain scientist. He's got a PhD in psychology. Yeah. But he wrote a book and he's referencing a lot of brain science work that's been done about how we see our future selves. Right. And so, like, for example, I felt like this was a good week because I got some exercise in, I ate a little bit better, things like that. Right. So if I sit there and go, I think about my future self, why would I not every day eat a little bit better, get a little bit more exercise, get a little bit more sleep? Because if I think about it, I know how that's going to affect my future self. But what he said is that they did a study, and when people think about themselves in the current form, their brain kind of activates a certain way. And they said they asked people to then think about their future self, and their brain acted a little different way. And then they asked them to think about somebody else completely, and the somebody else and your future self, the brain actually acted a lot of the same way. So it's like our current self doesn't really understand our future self. And so it's going, hey, future guy will figure it out, right? Future lady will figure it out. right now this donut looks delicious, and that emotion of that dopamine hit that I'm going to get because I just jammed that donut in my face is more powerful than this person I don't really know that's going to be, a month from now. And I think if we think about that in the way that we accomplish big things is how do we then break those things down into these little smaller bite-sized chunks? So you are celebrating that win, right? You close the gap through the celebration of wins. And I think that's, anyhow, I've been really interested in tying those things together.
Well, and I'll say this much to kind of drive that home is that anything that we're going to achieve, and this is down to the level of, I know in the embroidery world, down to the level of digitizing one design. There are times where thinking about the design as a whole is no longer good for you. I'm working on a big jacket-back design that's going to be 40 hours, which I have had a 40-hour design in my time. Thinking too much about the end of the thing is actually not as powerful whatsoever as I'm going to start here. If there are going to be changes that have to be made, so be it. I just need to start making it happen. There is a point at which imagining the thing done isn't the goal. It's right now I have to digitize this lettering in this area. I have to digitize this one space. And sometimes just moving through the process is it. And I think also it makes me think of kind of the War of Art, which is Stephen Pressfield, where it's like, no, you show up to do the work every day. And that's creativity. It's like inspiration has to find you already at your desk. It's not going to be there if you don't show up to do it, which means that some of that work, even the most creative work we do, is in the daily exercise of the thing. And that is super hard to remember. That's a challenge for me for certain, is to say that rather than thinking about these big goals or what's going to happen when it comes to, it's more like, all right. And for us who do these presentations and things, I don't need to be on stage right now. I need to be making a slide. I don't need to be at the, at the conference right now. I need to be writing a portion of my handout. I need to be writing this paragraph right now on this topic. And if I show up to do that often enough, the body of work will come, and especially when people think of it as I need to become an expert in something. This is something that happens all the time. They think about, I want to be good at X thing. And instead of saying, I will do this little step and work, they think about the end result too much. They get focused on that end result more than just saying, well, what that means is just practicing, just doing the thing, trying it out, testing it again, knowing that it will be a process and not focusing too hard on already being at that pinnacle. You won't, and that's okay. Like you won't be there tomorrow. But that doesn't mean you can't then show up today. Like that's the thing. You still have to show up today to be there tomorrow. But that doesn't mean, looking at it shouldn't be disheartening. It should just be, hey, that's expected. It's expected that I'm going to work one piece at a time because I can't work everywhere all at once all the time. I can do what I can do, and then I can measure as I go. But it's the actual showing up and doing the thing every day is probably, not probably, that is the thing that needs to be focused on. The process needs to be focused on a lot more than the goal. In that respect, especially when we're talking about that vision. I totally agree with that concept.
Interesting.
The expert is a foreigner to you. The worker today is the person who you are.
Correct. Yeah. If anybody just want to catch that, I'm still in the middle of it, but it's and don't let the name of the podcast fool you. My wife loves listening to some of these podcasts too. It's just the podcast called The Art of Manliness, but it sets your future self up for success. So,
well, thanks for bringing that in. That was a great thing to talk about, man.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Eric, gosh, we could try to set up some sort of really hilarious close here, but I think let's just call it a day. What do you say? We're right there.
I think it's a good time for it. And honestly, what I would just like to do is just wish everybody the best weekend they can have. Have some time for yourself, and remember that the process is going to take the time it takes.
Indeed. All right. Well, hopefully get to see as many of you as possible out there in Fort Worth next week. And we haven't really even talked about the half yet, so maybe that'll be happening live from Fort Worth too. Who knows?
It's possible. Stay tuned. For the first time not teaching during the show.
There you go, man. Could be happening. All right, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
See you then, folks.
Bye. All right.